and welcome back to Wake Up, Shift is Happening. I am Deborah Ariel Peach, and sitting next to me is the charming and ever so amazing Frank Ferrante. And before we get into really what you're here to talk about, we've had a little change of plans. In fact, this is live television, and so since the first guest, Josh and Rebecca Tickell, that were going to come on the show, Josh is actually very ill and has pushed himself all week and called about 45 minutes ago and said, I really can't do this. And so I huddled up with my team, and I was like, okay, well, and you got here and early, and I thought, and I tuned in. And the guidance that I got was to actually talk and to really what was in the highest divine good was for me to bring forth some information. So before I go into that information, I would like to acknowledge you and introduce you even more. We met about 2 years ago this week at the Topanga Film Festival. And it was at your, I think it was one of your the debut screenings of the film, May I Be Frank. And it is incredibly powerful and life transformative and transforming. And so here you are now. And thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
A lot of life has occurred for you.
And continues to do so.
Day to day.
Fortunately, I like to start my day on the right side of the grass. There's a lot of promise that way.
Exactly. So we're going to get into your whole story and what brought you into this transformational experience that is really revealing through May I Be Frank. And then we're going to talk further about that. The guidance I got, though, is to actually start talking about some of the different things that I have been given information on. And you know that I kind of traverse between being multidimensional, communicating in this dimension, as well as traverse with communicating with non-physical beings of light and energy, and get very detailed information for people, and also as well as what's going on on the planet, like in the macrocosm. So the guidance I got half an hour, 45 minutes ago, was to actually talk about some of these things that I only just mentioned a little bit about in the first show that I did, which was last week, and it was with people like Philip Collins and Foster and Kimberly Gamble and Mary Liz Murphy. So we're circling back after we've laid the foundation. And what I'd like to start with is some of the things that I mentioned in that show I referred to this time on the planet. Now, the title of the show today is Humanity is a Choice Point. And how do we go from breakdown to breakthrough? And so here we are on the planet, in the macrocosm of the planet. We are pretty much in breakdown in a lot of areas, most areas in our lives, as far as the systems. The banking system, if you're following any of the behind the scenes that are now is finally coming out to the mainstream media. They're starting to cover the LIBOR situation and the oil industry. And Josh Tickell, who was going to be here, has just done a film called The Big Fix, which is it talks about the Gulf oil spill and that situation. And the other things that really have not been working and serving the betterment of humankind and for the whole. And so I refer to this time, so the guides that I work with, I will refer to, many of them are Ascended Masters and the Angelic Realm. And I say work with because that's basically what it is. It's a strategic alliance that is telepathic communication. I get details. And Cobra, I had on the show last week, was somebody that I align very much with the information that he's bringing forth, which is why he came on in the show, and we've had several conversations. So where are we right now? So here we are, mid-2012, we're moving into the end of the year for 2012, and I refer to this time that we've been experiencing, especially in the last 10 years, 11 years since 9/11, as the descension reality as well as the deception reality. And I say this because the guidance that I've received is that in 2001, what was meant to occur in the game plan, in the big blueprint, was for us to really start an ascension journey where there was 12 timelines that were going to come together, 12 DNA strands activating, 12 zodiac signs, many things that were meant to our awakening, increasing in the vibration on the planet, as well as our physical crystalline grid structure that's within our physical vessels, to activate and to become higher vibration and much more love. And that by this time we were meant to be creating, many of us be creating modern day miracles. And we are not on that timeline. And so how do we create, how did we get here? And the only reason I'm saying this is so we have some understanding and awareness of how we got here, so that we can move past the challenges and the issues that have gotten us here, or that we have that have gotten us here, and move into the timeline that exists, that is, I believe, much more filled with love and abundance and the joy that we're meant to really be experiencing. And so one of the things that I'd like to just show a clip of, so there's some things that I have been told by my guides that have really affected us right now, not only because the powers that be that have had rather controlling agenda for money and for all sorts of different things, natural resources, etc. But also there has been some challenging aspects that have created some challenges with our physical vessel, especially our brain. And so one of the things is when the chemicals, as far as like chemtrails and the different things that in the chemicals that are in our food and whatnot, actually are affecting our brain chemistry. And so if we could roll, I just want to show a couple of clips, and then we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So right now, the clip that I'd like to show is about the amygdala. And because since 9/11, there's been so much fear and survival that has been pumped out through the media and through the banking, that there's not enough money, that there's, there's war on terrorism, etc. With that fear and survival information that we are now basically taking in, it's something that's in our brain chemistry that creates that reality then as well. And it keeps us in the fight or flight. Okay, so if we can roll that clip, this is just a 1 minute, really quick little animated clip that gives some information about the fight or flight perspective. And this is also ties into your experience, Frank, of the transformation that you've experienced, well, prior to the May I Be Frank experience.
The amygdala is a pair of small organs in the brain, each about the size of an almond. The amygdala acts like a thermostat, regulating, among other things, our normal baseline anxiety level. As anxiety levels rise in response to stressors such as bereavement, work stress, or money worries, for example, the amygdala's needle is pushed up to the high anxiety zone. Under normal circumstances, this needle returns to normal after the event. But when the stress or anxiety you experience is relentless, the needle gets stuck at the high anxiety position. It becomes instinctual. The subconscious mind, which controls all the automatic bodily systems, thinks that this new anxiety level is appropriate and normal, but you know consciously that it is not. It is as if the hard drive of your mind has been reprogrammed with new anxious software. With this new anxiety level come sensations and symptoms of anxiety disorder and maybe panic attacks, phobias, and disturbing thoughts. So in order to reverse these changes, you have to reset the needle of your amygdala back to the normal position.
So you start to get an idea of fear and survival. And we have a mass consciousness on the planet that is very much in fear and survival. How do we get out of this? We're at choice point. Humanity is a choice point. So how do we shift out of this? Well, the next clip that I'd like to share is with Bruce Lipton. Now, Bruce, I actually know from back in the day when I was producing a radio show called The Aware Show, and that was like back in early 2001. And Bruce is a cellular biologist, and he was kind of almost an atheist until he had kind of an awakening. And through cellular biology came into the awareness that everything is connected and that we create our reality. So this is a clip that he did as an interview, and I'm just going to have a portion of it shown.
The concept of a material universe ruled the world. And in 1925, physicists finally had to accept the reality that it's not a universe based on matter. It's actually a universe based on energy, because the atoms are not made out of matter. They're made out of energy. So everything is made out of energy. So there you are in one day saying this is a material mechanical universe and the body is a machine and it's got chemistry in it. And then according to physics the next day, it said, well, that's an illusion. The body is actually energy and it's influenced by energy. And yet the physicists going from Newtonian physics to quantum physics, it wasn't an easy transition. I mean, if you made your whole career teaching of a material universe and one day wake up and say, you know, everything I taught for all those years, let's just forget that and start again. It wasn't easy. So it was a transition phase where the old thinking had to evolve, leave the system, and the new thinking coming in. Well, today's new biology is exactly the same, but it has a more profound difference for us in one sense, because the old physics took us like from a crank telephone to a cell phone, or from a steam engine to a rocket ship engine. Mm-hmm. That was the difference between Newtonian physics and quantum physics. And in biology, the new biology is going to take us from a world today of crisis and ill health and a failing environment and world, and take us to another level of masterful control, where we, in our consciousness and our experiences of life, will actually have power over our own lives and not be the victims that we were programmed to be. So, to me, when people understand the nature of this and recognize how their perceptions about life, which we'll talk about beliefs about life, when they change, it actually has a biological connection through the energy field, through quantum physics, and through a new thing called epigenetic control. Remember, genetic control, controlled by genes. Epigenetic control is the new field of science. As a matter of fact, just within the last year or so, it's finally breaking into the public, because it's been at the leading edge of science for about 20 years. But that science takes a long time before it can ultimately get to the public or mass attention. So they're just bringing it to the world, to the mass world, epigenetic control. And epi means, that's a prefix that means above. So when you say the word epidermis, in biology, the skin, the epidermis, means the layer above the dermis. So epi means above, and you say epigenetic control, then that translates as control above the genes. And that is like the difference between either controlled by the genes or your control is above the genes. And when you're controlled by the genes, you're a victim of your genes. When you're controlled by something above your genes, then that controls your genes. And it turns out the mind is what's above the genes, and it's the mind that controls the genes. And when people in the world can own this, not as, well, that's a neat idea, but as a fact, then it says, well, if you want to change your life and you want to express different characters or traits, then it's incumbent upon you to know that your mind is involved with actually creating that ability, that behavior, that genetic expression that allows you to control what you want in your life. So we go from victim to master in this new biology.
Here we are. Humanity is that choice point. And this is an individual inside job, which is what you have been expressing for the last couple of years, as well as the macrocosm, the consciousness of the collective unified field. And so what I'm here to do is support people in having the awareness of what it takes. And I say to people, waking up is not for the mamsy-pamsy. And this is some of the things that we're going to share and show that you experienced in the making of May I Be Frank and your transformation. It can be hard as heck, right?
Some of it is hard, and most of it is just different.
Mm-hmm.
It also requires a willingness. It's not something. There's no magic bullet.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so let's just, you know what, we'll come back to the Bruce Lipton stuff and all of that later. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about how all of this really started, because in order for us to change and shift where we are as a collective consciousness, as humanity, it takes the kind of fortitude, the courage, the commitment, the willingness that you have experienced. And it took you stepping in and saying yes, basically. So let's go back to that. For people that haven't seen May I Be Frank, and we're going to show some clips of the film.
If we can find those.
Exactly. So this all started when you were at a restaurant, correct?
Yes.
Kathy?
And may I just go back to something you said
Absolutely.
earlier? You mind? Talking about the planetary shifts and all that.
Yeah.
And the breakdown, all these systems that are breaking down, and that whole notion that too big to fail, which is absurd because it's actually too big to sustain. And I think when I look at it from a metaphorical standpoint, when you think of a wounded animal,
Mm-hmm.
that's when they're most dangerous. And
Right.
And the way I perceive collectively what's going on is that these systems, and people are invested in these systems.
Absolutely.
And
Wholeheartedly.
very, very much invested in these systems, irrespective of whether or not it's in their best interest to do so.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at people's voting patterns, they're amazingly, it's amazing to see people's voting patterns, because they just vote directly against their best interest.
Right.
And so when the animal's wounded,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes more threatened and more threatening.
Yeah.
And you look at these people protesting, and right now people worry. People talk about the threat of China, and I think that's silly, because we're their best customer. They're not going to do anything to hurt us.
Mm-mm.
What we have to worry about are the banks and the police, and law enforcement, and not in the sense that, in terms of homeland security and all of that, because it promotes that fight or flight thing.
Absolutely.
And you think the terrible thing that happened in Aurora, you would think that people would be up in arms that you can actually go somewhere and buy a gas-powered rifle that will shoot 100 rounds of ammunition, like that. And instead, what happened is that California has sold double the amount of guns that it sold a few years ago.
Yeah.
Why?
Right. Right.
Who's
There's a
coming?
lot of stuff going on.
Is it
exactly.
Are we still worried about the British?
Right. No, and I think you're taking that conversation down a road where we're, especially here in America, in the United States, we're really at a pivotal point, and people really do need to wake up and to be aware of what's going on, and this whole homeland security situation and the things that have been fed to us through the media that are keeping this fear and survival reality in place. We need to transcend it and really wake up to what's going on.
Well, there are certain practices that propel a species to thrive, and to not just to survive and thrive, right? Because we thrive, right? That's like, a lion doesn't necessarily thrive; it just lives, survives. But we have the capacity to thrive. As an observer, it's like if somebody landed from another planet and looked at us, right?
Yeah.
They would say that we are working against our own survival.
Absolutely.
when we have systems in place that will prevent improvement.
Yes.
For example, I mean, just like take for example the pharmaceutical companies.
Yep.
All right. And by the way, and I'm not here to down the pharmaceutical companies. However,
Yeah.
it's easy to do that.
Yeah.
I'm staying away from that for a reason, and we can get into that later. It's not designed to cure anything.
No.
It is not designed to cure anything, and it's not in their best interest. Because I believe right now, if we were struck with this insight of how to, and we could cure cancer, and this thing will cure cancer,
Right.
we would not make it to the parking lot alive.
Right.
And that is a testament to something, an internal dysfunction that is really, it's we don't have to worry about our survival because we won't. And the one thing I wanted to mention is that one of the issues I have with the left, or at least part of the left, is that we know what the problems are. And sometimes it's really easy in discourse to get mired, to get stuck in the mire of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
We know what the problems are. So now, and it's important to look at it, and now then what is it that we can do about it? I'm not saying I even know,
Mm-hmm.
but collectively, that's what starts to happen.
Right.
Because I believe that collectively on the planet, we have the genius that will take care of the Texas-sized island of plastic in the Pacific. We have the genius that will resolve the problem in Japan.
Yep.
We have the genius that will resolve starvation in Africa throughout the world. We have that collective genius. What we don't have is the ability to coalesce as a
Yes.
group of people, so that we have these disparate groups. You know, the gays are over here, and you know the arms people over. I mean, everybody's like separate, and that's also promoted. It's really difficult to collectively unionize, for example.
Okay. So let's touch upon that.
Let's touch upon that.
So, last week, my first show, I had as part of my guests were the Foster and Kimberly Gamble, who, and the reason that I asked them to be a part of it was because of the foundation with Thrive, that they have set such a precedence, such a grounded way of bringing forth the information of there's really been a shadow government throughout the planet, and there's been a hidden agenda that has not been for the people. And so I'm not here, and I'm not interested in getting into all the conspiracy theory stuff, other than that is exactly why what you just said, we're working. I think that if people really woke up and awakened to co-creating together and coming back together and standing, not from a place of anger or not from a place of resentment or judgment, but really standing in our power for the things that we stand for. And it's even beyond freedom and democracy. It's really standing for free will. And that was one of the things we talked about last week too, that I was going to bring up again today, is that because there's been such a contraction and a controlled information through the media, and in order for us to hold together this reality of this descension reality that I refer to, we haven't even been given the choices, Homeland Security, whatever you want to refer to them as. We haven't even been given the free will choice to choose from absolutely any possibility. We were given a choice from, it's basically a multiple choice, you know, to remember doing a multiple choice test
Right.
in school.
Well,
it's multiple choice free will.
You right now we have the choice of like 36 flavors at Baskin Robbins. You can have like 14 different bagel flavors. Choices galore. Go to the Gap, 18 different kinds of jeans. But in terms of really substantial choice,
Right.
it's extremely limited. It's extremely limited,
and it's been held back for a reason.
And it's actually, the agenda's not so hidden as far as I'm concerned.
Not anymore.
You know, it's never really been, if you can just look at it. I mean, 1913 when they the Fed started and all of that. And the other thing is that the scarcity mentality, there's a validity to that, and I'll tell you the reason is because there isn't enough money if you look at the banking paradigm. When you think of interest payments, there's no way, if everybody wanted to pay back everything right now, there wouldn't be enough money to pay everything back.
Well, and
that's where inflation comes from. They print more money, devalues the thing, and creates more debt. Our economy is based on debt.
Right, it is, and that's what's got to change. If you really go down that rabbit hole and you really, exactly what you're talking about, get into the fiat system that was set up to manipulate that it's all debt-based rather than asset-based, that is why we're in this contracted situation globally that we are. Which,
and interestingly enough, if you look at some religious practices, interest was a sin.
Right.
And
okay.
There were some religious practices where interest was actually was condemned by a certain religious sects. Where did they get that insight? There was no Rothschilds then. There was no Bank of America then.
Right.
But there was an insight. This stuff, everything that I think that what's really fascinating to me is everything that's in the New Age and New Thought is not new. None of this is new. It's just a reawakening to principles. And if you look at first century and second century Christianity, they would fit right. They would be sitting here. People that were genuinely from their heart practicing first and second century Christianity would be in complete alignment with everything we're talking about in New Thought.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Frank. We're going to back up.
Okay.
Oh no, and we're gonna keep going. But what we're going to do is show your trailer.
Okay.
Because I really would like people to see the before and after, and why when I say you've displayed transformation. So and I say to people, like I said already, it's waking up it's not for the mamsy-pamsy. So let's go ahead and roll the trailer.
When I found drugs, I thought this was a secret they were keeping from me. I really did. I thought, holy shit, this is how you get through life. This is how you do it. And I realized I started to feel the way I thought I was supposed to feel. I was supposed to feel like John Wayne, but I didn't. I felt like Gumby.
Frank's a heavy-set Italian from Brooklyn, New York, sort of obnoxious.
Are you talking to me?
But, has got a really endearing way of being.
Frank's one of those guys, he walks in and before he knows anyone in the room, he's already like commenting about the space or making a joke.
The whole thing started off when Frank came in, Cafe Gratitude, a mostly raw food restaurant, and we have a question of the day. And the question of the day was, what do you want to do before you die? And Frank said, I want to fall in love one more time. I don't think anyone will love me with this body that I'm wearing because I don't love myself.
I'm taking a slew of other medications. In the morning, I practically take a fistful of pills that, I don't really even know what they're doing. And I feel really terrible about it, quite frankly.
This propelled me into action, and I just was like, you want to do an experiment? How about you come in here and you eat this food, you allow us to be your transformational cheerleaders so that you can shed whatever you're carrying, the shame, the weight, the discontent, and really love yourself so that someone else can love you. These have got to go.
That's not mine, that was left here.
Liar. Fried chicken. We know what Frankie's been sneaking. That's actually growing vegetables on that.
I haven't eaten any of that crap.
Look at that breakfast.
This looks like it should be mowed.
It actually was mowed, and then it turned into that. Oh, God, he's doing it champ style.
Every muscle in my body is about to split in half right now.
If we can heal the self-diminishing aspect of Frank, that's going to change a lot of aspects of his life.
It's nice to meet you. No, I'm not from outer space.
Repeat after me.
Yes, sir.
I, Frank.
I, Frank.
Do love me.
Do love me. I am perfect health. Radiant beauty. It feels terrible.
This is what you want.
All right. Okay. I keep thinking every day, well, you know, if something will happen today to create a shift, somewhere in me I believe that things are going to change.
What would love do now?
It's just that I don't see how.
What would love do now?
My experience is that I'm still caught up in my anger towards my daughter and Mia for letting this whole thing happen. That, you know, to take away my ability to take care of my kids.
Until you see Lisa face to face and deal with her anger, she's angry because of what she saw me going through. Because see, you didn't see that.
Did anybody ever say to her this was not right what we did? No. They haven't got the fucking balls. Fucking right. As rageful and self-loathing as I feel right now, I might as well have just still be a fucking dope fiend.
I wanna be a friend.
But I don't think that the pain you cause other people can be separated from the pain that you incur on yourself.
I wanna be a friend.
Sorry I hurt a lot of people. I'm greatly sorry.
I'm gonna live my life. I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna fly so high.
Charlotte said, you know, your life will change.
I'm gonna live my life. I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna fly so high. You won't see me hesitate.
It happens to some people.
Never to come down again.
All of that has helped me come back to the person I was supposed to be in the first place.
I wanna be a friend.
I caught a glimpse of my foreskin this morning. I did!
Looking down?
I kind of took my stomach in, but I saw a glimpse. I mean, we're on our way there, boys!
Well, we're on our way there, boys.
Oh.
So now for those of you that have not seen the May I Be Frank, now you know why Frank is here and why we're talking about choices and why we're talking about transformation, and that waking up and transformation is not necessarily for the mamsy-pamsy. It can be really challenging. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad. I feel very, very fortunate. You know, most people that I know that have gone through the things that I've gone through with drugs and alcohol and narcotics and all of that, you know, a lot of people aren't here.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, I often when I go to like a 12-step meeting and people talk about, I went to my high school reunion and I'm thinking, God, you know, my high school they didn't even give it a proper name. It was called Eastern District High School. I mean, like they must have ran out of presidents or inventors or something. But I thought, my high school reunion would be an institution somewhere. I mean, really, because like most, you know, half of them would be on one side of the glass and the other half would be on the other side, or a morgue.
Or a morgue.
Oh,
yeah.
So I'm very, very lucky. And you're right. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
I really notice, one of the things I notice is that about people is that people may hate their lives, but they hate change even more.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a very uncomfortable place to be.
Right.
It's a very, very difficult and challenging place to be. However, if you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done.
Or if you want to get back to where you were before, and you know.
Well, actually, you don't want to get back there because because wherever back there was, you got here from that place.
Yeah, good point.
So it's really and that's, you know, another form of thinking that people have this notion. Every generation has this notion that there was once the good old days.
Right.
And it's a very, very subjective view of history.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on who you are and what you had at the time. So people could say, well, the 50s and 40s and 50s were a simpler time. If you were a white middle class person,
right?
If you were a black person, you couldn't go to the 5 and 10 and get a cup of coffee,
right?
So it really depends on who you were, and at the time. And this goes all the way back to Socrates. Every generation talked about how the one before. I figured the only one that couldn't make that claim would be Lucy, the skeleton they found in Africa that's 250,000 years old. Her contemporaries in Africa could not have said that because there was nobody before them.
Right. Wow.
So it's really about getting into the present. How things used to be are no longer how they are.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of like when people talk about their childhood. You know, if they had, yes, those issues may have been imposed upon you at one point. Now they're your issues. What are you going to do about them?
Right.
You know.
So let's go back.
Let's get into the Wayback Machine.
The Wayback Machine. How did this all start for you? You were sitting in a restaurant because you made a choice. You basically were at choice point, and it had to do with love.
Love is the answer, and everything else is a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds really hippy-dippy, and I really don't care.
I don't think it sounds hippy-dippy.
What happened was that I was in where I was in my life at that time. I was nearly 300 pounds. I was pre-diabetic. I was being was undergoing chemotherapy. I had hepatitis C, and I was taking these really, really powerful drugs that just basically kill everything. Chemo basically. It's funny how, in a way, the practice of medicine hasn't changed from the High Middle Ages. In the High Middle Ages, they discovered a cure for syphilis. It was mercury. It, in fact, cured syphilis. It also killed you in a week. And chemo really reminds me of that kind of thing. Anyway, I was really sick. I was very just depressed, very lonely, and I was on my way to rent some Italian films to bring to my cousin Michelangelo, who was ill at the time. I was going to go to San Diego, and I was living in San Francisco, and there's this video store that specializes in foreign titles. Because I'm a snob, they have to be subtitled. Can't do the dub thing, right? So please give a reasonable. So I started out by really wanting to do something kind for my cousin. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do something kind for my cousin. But when in retrospect, that's how it started. And I went to this part of town that I normally didn't go to get these videos, and I saw a sign saying Cafe Gratitude. And in the 12-step world, gratitude is a central virtue. One of the things that we say, for example, is a grateful heart will not drink. That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to take that a step further, a grateful heart is less likely to create wreckage in people's lives either. So I thought somebody in the 12-step world was being cute.
Interesting.
And it was a dark and dreary February evening, and it was the kind of evening you would have expected Sidney Greenstreet and Humphrey Bogart to be walking behind you. It was like foggy, and the ground had a layer of mist on it. And so I walk into this cafe, and there was hardly anyone in there. And as I opened the door, I'm met with this fanfare. Hi, welcome, glad you're here. Come on in, glad you're here. And hey, I mean, it was like 18 years worth of greetings in like 2 seconds. And prior to that time, I was so lonely. I was ringing my own doorbell to hear what a visitor might sound like. So I walk over to Ryland, who was one of the filmmakers, and I said, hey, man, I had to have a cup of coffee in Cafe Gratitude because I thought somebody here must be in recovery. And he looked at me and smiled and said, well, we're all recovering from something, aren't we?
Oh, funny.
And I immediately knew he was not in the 12-step world, and just figured he might have smoked a joint before going to work. And so I started going there because when I was that fat, I never felt seen. I felt like people were just looking at my exterior and couldn't see past it. And the very thing I wanted, I've actually prevented by doing that. And so I kept going, and one day, they have one of the things they do in Cafe Gratitude is they ask a question of the day, and the function of that is to promote meaningful dialogue among the people in the table. And for example,
well, wait 1 second. So Cafe Gratitude, I think in some of the restaurants there's like community tables, right?
Yes.
Where you share.
Yes.
You'll go in by yourself and you like can share a meal at a community table.
Yes.
Type of thing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If you choose.
If you choose.
Or it's the only place to sit.
Right.
In which case you still have a choice, but.
Right.
And so I started going there, and as I said, one of the questions might be, what are you grateful for, or what moves you in your life. That particular day, after I had been going there for a while, because I started feeling comfortable in that atmosphere,
right.
The question of the day was, what's something you want to do before you die? And I said, before I die, I want to fall in love one more time, but I don't think it's going to happen given the way I look and the way I feel.
Mm.
And this moved him, which I didn't know at the time. And a few days later, I'm back in the restaurant, and Rylan comes up. He comes and sits down and says, "Hey, Frankie, you know that movie Super Size Me?" I said, "Yeah, well, that's where that movie, that young, healthy guy eats himself sick through eating fast food for a month."
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, we have an idea for a film that's the opposite of that. We want to take a guy who's not well," which was quite a generous assessment for my condition at the time.
Right.
But he says, "We want to take a guy who's not well and feed him raw food for X amount of time and go to holistic health practitioners and do colonics," another thing I didn't know anything about.
Right.
And we want you to be the guy."
Wow.
I said, "All right." And I didn't think anything of it. Now, the magic of this is that we didn't have a camera. I had the most film experience because I had seen the most movies.
I love that.
And somehow, piece by piece, things came together. We got a camera that was perfect for the job because there was somebody in their community that was a professional filmmaker, and there was the latest and the greatest that just came out. And what he had now is no longer to him valuable, but to us it was Star Wars level technology. And people started donating a little bit here, like really, when I say a little bit, like $5 here, $20 there, and we started this process. And it took 2 years. The shooting was 42 days. It took nearly 2 years to edit it and put a soundtrack on it. And in that time, people started getting involved with somehow it got out. Greg Marks, who's the alchemist who put this together, he took 160 hours of tape and put this together. But when we finished shooting, we didn't know what to do. There was, as I said, 160 hours of tape in a shoebox. Right. And we bought that program, Final Cut Pro. Right. And we were like three monkeys. You know how to do that? No. You know how to do that? No. We thought maybe we'd learn how to edit film in our spare time.
Right.
And I was in graduate school, and they were working full time in restaurants, and we were supposed. So we didn't. So the shoebox stood in our closet for months, and then Greg Marks came on the scene, and he came from New York to do some meaningful film work, and he met the guys, and they met at a fundraiser, and they started talking. He says, "Yeah, well, we have this 160 hours of tape. Well, let me just take it out." So he takes it home, and the next morning he had watched a whole bunch of tapes through the night. He watched it throughout the night. Calls up one of the guys crying in the morning. "Do you guys have any idea of what you have here?"
Oh, I just have chills.
And the three monkeys looked at each other and said, "No." And Greg Marks on a shoestring, and I mean a shoestring. We pulled together whatever we could to pay him $1,500 a month. Mm. He barely kept his lights on, and he put this thing together. He wove. There was all this yarn that we had, and he found the threads of gold, and wove a tapestry that's this final print. And we've been touring the film around the country, always to remarkably wonderful responses. And because it's a documentary film, we're still, it's challenging.
It's a process, and
so we're still open to any brilliant financial planning ideas,
and opportunities.
Possibilities and opportunities. I'm ready to accept. I'm ready to receive.
Okay, so I'd actually like to show a couple more clips from the film. And what I'd like to do is show the clip that is Well, first, one of the clips I want to show is of you doing the agreement, of moving into the process.
Which,
of it.
by the way, poetically enough, that was on Valentine's Day.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
Would I lie to you?
Oh, that's so sweet, and it is all about
it
love.
It was on Valentine's Day, yes, indeed.
Okay, so in fact, why don't we just go there, because the other clip, the other one was of you with all the medication and the choices, but we've kind of already covered that. So why don't we, if we can actually talk about the agreement, and one of the reasons that I wanted to bring that in is because even with the private client work that I do, I ask people to sign an agreement.
Right.
Because it's so empowering and I think powerful when you actually have a document that is printed out that you go through the details of it, and just like a contract, an agreement for business, right?
Well, it's a commitment. It certainly wasn't an enforceable document.
Right.
What it was something, actually, in my opinion, deeper. Because I've broken enforceable documents in my in my life. I'm not proud of it, but I have. This one was something else. When you see your words, and they have nothing to do with do this or else. Right. It's where it becomes something on a soul level. Right, and so I was confronted with maintaining my integrity, and I had no idea. When I met these guys, until I signed it, I didn't realize the depth
of what you were getting into.
That's one thing, but the depth of how much I valued my word. Yeah. And no, none of us had any idea. If they had any idea of what they were getting into, I don't know if they would have done it. And that's the beauty of life.
Maybe you wouldn't have either.
The beauty and the tragedy of life is that we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Well, it's funny about that with a couple things actually. One about the agreement is that I think a lot of people take for granted, when we give our word and when we actually stick to our word. It's when be impeccable with your word is one of the 4 agreements. Right. But when you really are willing to have that commitment to your word, how absolutely powerful that is, not only for other people but for yourself. And that's why I was so drawn to them showing you doing the agreement, because I have a feeling, you tell me, that's kind of when it really started to set in what you were doing. Kind of really started to...
It started. It started. It did begin. It started to set in what I was like, uh-oh. Like,
what the hell am I getting into?
And there was a moment where I was resistant. And like
you think?
Well, yeah. And it was the part where I look at it in retrospect where I thought I didn't understand what he was saying. But I think what it was I didn't want to hear what he was saying. Right. But there was actually no way out. Right. Like there was no real legitimate way out of there. And I'm grateful I did it. I'm very grateful.
And the other thing too is because I'm going to be doing something similar within just a couple of weeks. Actually, I'm committing to going more raw. And also doing a whole detox and cleanse, something I did about 8-9 years ago. But I'm going to bring it into the show because I have a feeling, one thing is I think it's so empowering when you really just are a way shower, and you are a way shower, that people really have a role model and they get to see what it looks like to the commitment and the depth of where you need to go when you do want to transform and make changes. And especially, if we look at this in the macrocosm, because humanity is at choice point. So if we really look at what it takes individually, what's it going to take collectively? Okay, we're ready. We're going to watch the agreement.
So, read this, right? I agree to eat 3 meals at a Cafe Gratitude, which are approved by either Matthew or Tarsus. 2, I agree to complete my daily logbook every day, all portions at breakfast. Okay. I agree to do my daily affirmation every day when I wake up and every night before bed. I agree to walk 15 minutes every day, yes.
I agree to order my food in its affirmation name. I agree to drink a gallon of water a day, and I agree to call either Carrie, Connor, or Rylan and communicate whether I have completed my daily agreements or not. I agree to be on time for all my appointments. I agree gratefully and happily to be on time for all my divine important appointments. I agree to not degrade myself. I agree not to degrade myself. I agree to relate to my food as medicine and my medicine as my food. Ah, yes. I agree to be coachable and be in this project with a beginner's mind. Yes, I do. I absolutely have my word. I understand and agree to relate to Connor, Carrie, and Rylan as coaches and my coaches in the transformation of my life. What is that? I mean, I'm not sure what that means. I mean,
well, it's kind of like you
respect.
Well, no, it's like a coach. Like to understand that we are your coach. Like if you're an athlete, and the game that we're playing is the transformation of your life. You're the player in that, and we're your coach. And just like to know that that's when we say things to you, and like it's because we are coaching you in getting this surrender.
Already resisting.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Already resisting, but I agree.
Okay, so there you were, making your agreement. And so you said something at the very beginning of the show about willingness. Now what's interesting about that is I actually have a video up on YouTube which is entitled The Alchemy of Yes. And it's all about when we're willing, that actually changes our brain chemistry. So going back to what I was even talking about at the beginning, which I didn't get into because we weren't able to show some of the clips that I wanted to show, but that our brain chemistry actually changes when we say yes, when we have a willingness to do something. So what did you experience once you signed that agreement?
At the time, I really still didn't know what I was getting into. And what did at the time, yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I knew that like if I had to do these things, I was going to do them.
Yeah. And
I didn't know what quote unquote these things actually were, because at the time I really had no idea about the raw food world.
Right.
I thought vegan was a planet. You know,
right.
that Spock directed Chekhov to plot a course for.
Right.
I had no idea what these things were. I didn't, and so it didn't. You know, it didn't really hit me. And the other thing that people often ask is, or comment on, is the courage that it took to be that open. And I used to be a little uncomfortable with that, because it's not like it was this kid with a little camera and a boom mic that was made out of PVC pipe. So it didn't have the gravitas of a Spielberg set.
Right.
And so I just kept going. It was just basically they were shooting my life as I went on.
Right.
The thing that you said earlier, I think is very poignant, is that what certain things look like. For example, it's good to see it's good to see the before and after. I think it's equally, if not more important, to see the during.
Yeah.
And because it's not that simple. It's not like ordering the ab machine on late night cocaine television and think that you're going to fix everything with the ab machine. No, it's a holistic approach. And to see what things look like, and I'll take it to a really personal experience. My relationships, my romantic relationships, most of them were very turbulent. Most of them. But it wasn't until recently that, like when I say recently, within the past 2 years, that I actually saw what love looked like. I had no idea what it looked like to genuinely be loved by someone. I didn't know. Now, it doesn't mean that people didn't love me,
right.
But I didn't have enough of the veils off of my vision,
right,
to see it. And once I saw it, there was no way of putting the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't go back.
No.
To go back is to die.
Right.
And so you're right. I really agree with you to show it. And the thing about our film is that I like is it brings it down to a blue collar working class spiritual warrior approach.
Yeah.
It's not a highfalutin guy sitting on top of a stage that seems to have all of his stuff together.
Right.
Because I don't.
Yeah.
By any stretch of the imagination, I never arrived. I just go from station to station and hopefully get, and I believe we're all on the same train going to the same place.
Right.
It's important for people to have room to fall.
Right.
If they fall.
Right.
It doesn't make them wrong.
Right.
And sometimes people also use a fall as an excuse to go back to where they were because it's familiar and it's comfortable. And there's that perverse comfort in what's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's a price for that.
Yes. I'd like to go back to a couple things. One is when you were talking about that you really didn't know what you were getting into. And
sort of like today when I came here.
Right? I was like,
I had no idea, but you look pretty safe. You weren't armed. I figured, okay.
We'll have fun. Okay, so the we're gonna do the loving yourself clip next, but here's what I like to go back to. A couple things. One is you didn't know what you were getting into, really, and you were doing this agreement, and there were things that didn't make sense to you because this kind of the space that you were in is what I refer to as a lot of people are in the I don't know what I don't know space, and especially when it comes to transformation. So it's like I'm going to be talking a lot more in future shows about alchemical process and DNA transformation and activations and brain chemistry and this whole transformation that the planet is going through with the grids and the matrix and the grid within our body and all of this, right? So a lot of people are going to be in the I don't know what I don't know, but that's okay.
It's more than okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's more than okay, because everything you know has got you to this place.
Right.
Right. So the I don't know is part of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell, who I like my man, who talks about, and that's the ordeal. Mm-hmm. The idea of the circle of the hero's journey. The circle is the initial is the initial part is the departure, where you leave what's familiar.
Right.
And at one point you confront your demons, which are always within, and you go through an ordeal. Mm-hmm. And eventually you come back home to share that experience, and then do that again. And again, this is not also Joseph Campbell. The whole Pema Chodron talks about discovering the comfort in not knowing,
right,
and the unfamiliar, and it's in Buddhism. It's just being. I
think that what you're saying, what we're talking about right now, is absolutely imperative right now for people to really grasp. And the reason that I wanted to bring that back in is because this shift that I think that we're about to experience, even way more than we have yet, and my guides actually were just saying this to me a few days ago, is that it's really important right now for people to just let go of the old paradigm, the old aspects, the systems, that you were saying that so many people are tied into. Their lives depend on these systems. The more that people can let go of and allow that paradigm and that reality to unwind and release, the faster we can move into this shift, this new paradigm, where and be in surrender and be in the openness, like what you were experiencing when you said yes. You weren't sure what you were saying yes to.
I had no idea.
Right. So, and that is so powerful right there. And the other thing too is they were talking about in the agreement being coachable. And that's the other thing too, is I think that there's going to be so many people that as we move through this shift, they don't know what the heck is going on. But if they are willing to be coachable and just be in surrender, like what did you experience by being in surrender and just being coachable at that point? And how old was this? How old were you?
I was 54 at the time.
Okay.
And the thing about
so you were not
oh no,
you would be considered an old dog, right? In the old paradigm.
Yeah, except to somebody who was 60.
Right. I'm just saying, 60 is the new 30. So,
right, exactly. Yeah, it's the new black. So Yeah, to be the old shuls, in the Jewish tradition, where the rabbi went and taught, was designed so that the students were always above the rabbi, so he have to look up to enable him to maintain a sense of humility.
Interesting.
I can't learn anything if I think I know everything.
Absolutely.
And so it requires a degree of surrender, and it's important to recognize that those things are in the New Age world, and in some of the stuff that's in this so-called spiritual world, we talk about with a degree of almost flippantly about certain things. It isn't. I feel that as an elder, I consider myself an elder now, and I recognize that it's about walking the talk.
Yeah.
And if I talk about surrender, then I have to be able to surrender something I really don't want to surrender.
Yeah.
And I think that you think about like a child. My daughter used to have the blanket thing going. She used to suck the blanket, and it was starting to affect the shape of her teeth and all that stuff. What it took for us to have her let that go.
Wow. Yeah.
At the time, it took a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the biblical things that is said, like for example, the meek shall inherit the earth, right? The patience that it takes as parents, the love that it takes as parents to get your kids to do the right thing, sometimes, and a degree of sternness. But I'm saying, say a little kid that you got to take the blanket away because it's starting to affect her health,
well-being, right?
And so, how to do that lovingly, and it's not our orientation. We want an antibiotic. God damn it, we want this. And so we want an immediate, instant gratification. Takes too long. And when I think about the meek inheriting the earth, it's really, there's a lot of power in exhibiting patience, mindfulness, intelligence, prudence, all those things that really take a tremendous amount of introspection and a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice, sacrificing the immediate gratification. Right. Which, by the way, I've never been good at.
Right.
Considering I was a drug addict and an alcoholic for 25 years, instant gratification took too long. Most of the second half of my life has been learning or unlearning so many things so that I can learn another way of being, and so
being.
It's
being.
What did I say?
Being. I just want to actually.
Oh, did I say bean?
No, you said it right, but I'm actually really, I want to bring that to the forefront. Being. Because so many of us have been living in the doing.
Right.
And it was what I experienced, that watching you was actually coming in contact with your beingness.
Right. And it was very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's very uncomfortable if you've lived a life of self-loathing, which is rooted in fear.
Yes.
For so many years, it's not like I was terrified that if I looked deep enough, that what I was gonna find was what I thought was there. First of all, I thought there was nothing there.
Right.
And I thought whatever I would find there was going to be less than adequate.
Right.
And it's the opposite. It's the Emersonian journey the journey without distance, the 18 inches between my head and my heart. And the idea of being it takes so much fortitude to be vulnerable.
Yep.
Because in the seat of vulnerability, that is in the center of being in the vulnerability place, is also the seat of creativity.
Yeah.
It's the seat of love. It's where I can actually genuinely connect with you.
That's right.
I have to be seen. In order to be seen, I have to be naked.
Yes.
Figuratively speaking, I have to be naked. And that's a very vulnerable, scary place. It's also where shame runs rampant. It's like there. So all of those things, and to sit in that space, it takes a tremendous amount of internal of spiritual fortitude.
Absolutely.
The difference between spiritual fortitude and physical strength is, in physical strength, the practices it's resistance and it's resistance and exertion and resistance. The spiritual muscle, on the other hand, requires silence and stillness.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're used to resistance and force, that's a very scary place to be.
You've just touched on so many different things, and I'm just going to put a spiritual slant on what you just talked about in regards to the resistance,
as opposed to the pedestrian nature that I expressed myself.
No, and about the vulnerability. Because I think, are on this planet, with all the fear and survival, so many people are ashamed at where they are right now, I think, especially financially. And, oh, this is interesting. I just thought of this. One of my guides actually came in. I was channeling information about a month and a half ago. And they said, if people they had no personal belongings left, and they only had their choices, what choices would they be making for their lives right now? Do you know what I mean? But going to what you were talking about in regards to the vulnerability, is that I think that is part of, that's like, if we have a checklist of humanity's at choice point, how do we go from breakthrough to breakdown to breakthrough, that at the top of the list is a willingness to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And a willingness to that 18 inches, because one of the taglines of this show is the journey from our head to our heart, is that willingness to take that journey. And we couldn't be sitting here having this kind of conversation if we didn't have two hearts open, communicating mm-hmm. through open heart, vulnerability, willingness, etc. Correct? So the what you were just talking about also, I just want to bring this into presence, is that forceful energy is the masculine energy. And the sitting and being in the stillness is the feminine energy. And we need both of those to be in balance in ourselves before we can even experience mm-hmm. it out there in the big world. Correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think this is actually a perfect time. If we are cued, I'd love to go to the loving yourself part of the film. Okay.
The whole thing started off of me being impacted by him saying, for his body to look like it does, you don't feel like you're going to be able to love yourself enough that someone else would love you. And here we are starting this process of you loving yourself and loving your body on Valentine's Day. 4 ounces of wheatgrass.
Oh joy.
In the morning, yeah. And then we're gonna give you a smoothie that's gonna be mostly coconut milk with figs, cacao, which is chocolate, vitamin or green, like a super concentrated green smoothie food, and it's gonna have a few dates in it. Okay, so your midday meal is the enchilada with a salad and 16 ounces of I Am Healthy, which is the kale, celery, cucumber.
We had that yesterday. Juice. That's the one your brother has a hard time downing. Yes.
Look at that breakfast. Let's have a shot of that breakfast. Yeah. Oh. So Frank,
you are renewed.
One thing you can be sure of, like almost every nutrient that exists in there, like that you could live on. This is just your treat. That you could live on.
This looks like it should be mowed.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it actually was mowed, and then it turned into that. The taste is repulsive to the degree that you need to detox.
Oh, how convenient. How convenient.
And it's funny that he says that, because just yesterday, Frank does know almost everything. Yeah. And he was talking about espresso, and that, he has, 4 or 5 shots of espresso, and he realizes at this point 4 and 5 shots is still not carrying him through the day.
Right. I'm just using coffee like an amphetamine, essentially to get it past that next. And what I mentioned to him yesterday was I noticed the workshop that when you and Terces, you and your wife, at 9 o'clock in the morning, when you're starting, you look exactly the same at 6, which I'm ready to collapse. I'm looking for a place to hide and go to sleep. But you have remained consistent. You're not up, you're not down, and I noticed that, and that looked really attractive to me. And here it is with the stuff that's in the back of the lawnmower. Just drink it.
Don't down the whole thing. Medicine. Remember, it's not food, it's medicine.
Got that right. Shit, the only thing missing is add a little quinine to it. Why don't you?
Yeah.
Oh man.
So let's talk about that, because you just mentioned a couple minutes ago about self-loathing, and what it took for you to go from and recognize self-loathing to loving yourself, because that was a big part of this journey, right? They really encouraged affirmations and looking in the mirror. What was that? What did you have to do? Not have to, but what did you get to do?
What did I get to do?
Yeah.
What did I joyfully engage in? I was the affirmations for me were one of the hardest practices. It was I felt like my intestines were unraveling. It was so difficult to look in the mirror. It felt so disingenuous. It felt stupid. It felt disingenuous. It felt like I thought that God himself would come down and punish me for the magnitude of this lie. And
funny.
and
Interesting.
yeah, and so it also indicates where the work is physically, because I felt it in my body.
You felt.
I felt certain when I would say certain things, I would feel some. I couldn't identify because I wasn't familiar with that whole world, and I was very out of touch with my body.
Yeah, the emotional connection with the physical body.
Yes, exactly. So I recognized.
I think most people are.
I think most people are too. Especially since if you don't look like a cover of a magazine, and so if you really want to challenge yourself with affirmations, do it in front of the mirror naked. And I still sometimes it's difficult still. Nevertheless, it's much easier. And the journey of self-love is an interesting topic, because I think a lot of people these days get stuck in this thing where self-love and self-care have become this notion of like Thai massages and pedicures and getting your chakras aligned, when in fact, and I can't go out there and do that right now. I'm working on myself. I'm healing, and I think that's a bunch of BS, because I think that you have to get out there and interact and give love in order to feel. And you have to get outside of yourself and get into the rhythm of your brother's heart in order to experience the love that's in your heart. At least that's the way I see it. And the idea of I can't do this right now, I'm healing, is just another. It's kind of selfish and really nowhere place to be.
Well, I think I'm gonna actually counter that.
Good. It's the friction in the oyster that creates the pearl.
Because right now, especially because I think a lot of people are coming out of isolation for several years, and there is healing, and so even I'm just gonna say there needs to be a balance.
I agree. I'm not. I mean,
and an honoring of.
I agree. I meditate and pray in the morning, and there's a difference. There's definitely a place for solitude. I'm not in any way, shape, or form minimizing the value of that. To use that as a way of not doing work with others, because it's in the forgiving that we are forgiven. It's really in the interaction. If there's only a few people that can actually go to the mountaintop and like live in a cave. Most of us, and to do the work that you're talking about requires interaction when I don't feel like it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is I also would like to bring up is that when you do interact with people, that's really when you see where you have triggers, where you've got issues.
Yeah, when I'm by myself, everything's going pretty damn smooth. What could go wrong?
Right.
But then particularly familial relationships and romantic relationships will definitely bring up what one needs to work on. And I also believe, being that we're talking about relations for a second, is that I believe that at the root, all relationships are the same. The fundamental, the foundation of all relationships are the same. How the expression manifests in that relationship may differ. So the way I treat my son will be different than the way I treat my mother. But at the root of it, it's all a loving relationship, and it's rooted in integrity, love, and etc.
Right.
And so so I don't believe in the notion of compartmentalizing relationships at all.
No, exactly. Okay, so how do you, if somebody was in an experience in their life of that self-loathing, and or not really even having in the conversation of loving themselves, because I actually have a 108-day program that it's an email campaign that is free for people. It's called 108 Days of I Am Loving Myself. And I think it's one of the most underrated, untalked about conversations on the planet. So if somebody wasn't really, this is maybe kind of a new conversation for them. And I think, and I also want to say a disclaimer, I think a lot of people say logically, oh sure, I love myself. But when it really comes down to it, standing in front of that mirror naked, or being willing to expose, being vulnerable, and not having shame or wanting to hide, even the emotional stuff. I think that there's a lot of people on the planet who are not really in alignment with loving themselves fully, inside and out.
Well, that's very clear. Turn on television and you'll see that. Reality shows, for example, and all those things. And really,
don't get me started on that.
The things that we began with in the program indicate that it's not separate. What's happening with the bank? There are human beings running that.
Yeah.
And those human beings, it's not like some kind of machine that ran amok. It's human beings that are at the helm of that, and human beings that created it, and human beings that can shift it. So what you're seeing is all this neurosis magnified.
Right. And so if somebody really wasn't in that conversation yet in their lives, what would you say to them to just give them a kickstart in that direction from your experiences?
Sometimes I wonder if there's something you can actually say rather than demonstrate. That the information's all out there. Marianne Williamson says the time of downloading is over.
Right.
We have all the information
within ourselves.
Now, and outside of ourselves. And John Lennon said it too. You can't say anything. Can't do anything that hasn't been done, or say anything that hasn't been said. And Dylan, and they also alluded to that. And technology, so we now have a different kind of technology, but essentially, I think that human beings like to think that their internal landscape is in lockstep with technological advancement, and it's not.
Right.
And so, what would I say to someone? I at this moment, I can't think of anything really. I wish I could think of something really profound. Except that when I've learned something, it's by watching someone else. It's like parenting. I was parented in such a way that do what I say, not what I do.
Right. Don't
and
question.
So there was this duplicity all the time.
Right.
And I think at the root of it, you think about, what would have happened if Hitler got admitted to art school and somebody says, "Oh, I love that painting, Adolf." Right. And it's really. I think that all the tragedies and all the beauty and all the tragedy in the world is rooted in people's desire to be loved.
I agree.
All of it, the greatness and the horror,
right,
is in people's desire to experience genuine love in their lives. And yes, there's the psychopaths. Yes, there's the crazies. But even that poor bastard in Aurora, people are going to say, "Oh, you said that." Something went wrong.
Right.
Something went wrong. Somewhere along the line, something went wrong.
Right.
And of course, I'm not condoning what happened at all. It's just that something went wrong. And one of the tragedies of our time is our resistance or reluctance or absolute refusal to look at causes and conditions.
Right.
We have more people in jail in our country than in China.
Right.
They have 1 billion people in China. They're nicer? What? So we...
They don't get caught?
So what we do is we build more prisons rather than look at causes and conditions. Because causes and conditions requires a softness, an introspection, a critical thinking. And critical thinking counters this notion of building more prisons of punishment. And one other thing I wanted to mention that I think was really important in the transformational experience, what I learned was my attachment to these feelings, of these negative feelings. If you would have said, you and I were sitting over coffee, I would swear to you up and down, no, I don't want to be anxious. Of course I want to feel serene. And yet, my life was dominated by these feelings of anxiety, or these feelings of depression, or these feelings of the other shoe's going to drop and impending doom. I had these, and I had no idea of how attached I was to these feelings. And the reason I was attached to them, I mean, first of all, I had them a long time,
right?
But they initially developed out of a sense of survival,
right? In
my childhood,
right? And
so even though they no longer served me and they had nothing to do with the moment, they were still in there. And the idea of letting go of those feelings would generate a level of life and death anxiety, because they were rooted in my belief that this is how I survived.
Right.
And even though they have nothing to do with the moment, and I thought, wow, I really am attached. And I thought, okay, so making the choice point that you like to talk about, it's not just a choice. I have to carve a new neural pathway for that feeling to drop into, because its normal go-to place was to acquiesce to and to validate that belief, do something. So now I have to have another go-to place for that feeling. When that feeling erupts of fear, to like, okay, well, instead of going to the normal place where I went to, where oh my God, I have to watch out, and then prepare myself for what I believe was going to happen, go to this other place.
Right. Right.
And that takes time to carve a new neural pathway. If you're farming, it takes time to till the earth and make that that new furrow.
This is exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. This is exactly what Bruce Lipton talks about, and the neural pathways in the brain, and having that path of a new thought process. Right. And I'm so glad you brought up the whole thing about attachment. Because I think that people don't really even realize how attached they are in that fear and survival. The brain, it's a brain situation with the medulla and the amygdala. And once that's triggered, and you talked about the wild animal, at the beginning of the show as well, is that we feel that we are oftentimes, when we're in that fear and survival, it's like there's an impending attack. Almost constant, right? And
I'm sorry.
No, that.
And so there's a wonderful scene in Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, and he's like really being emphatic in this scene, and he jumps on the desk, and because he says sometimes you just gotta look, you gotta jump on the desk, you gotta look at the room from on top of the desk.
Fabulous scene.
That corresponds with the notion of turning the other cheek.
Right.
It means that to look at something with a different point of view, with a different, from a different perspective, and that's what it means. It doesn't mean that you condone somebody's behavior, and it's like forgiveness. It doesn't mean you condone the behavior or that you allow it to happen again. It means that you look at it from a different perspective.
Right.
And the Four Agreements, not taking anything personally. And there's an enormous amount of power in not taking something personally. Absolutely. And as a man, one of the things I've learned, because the way I was taught to be a man had nothing to do with being a man, is learning the immeasurably important distinction between power and force.
Right.
And how one is unsustainable and requires exertion and is rooted in fear, and the other requires no movement at all, and is inherent.
Right. Force being the first description, and power being
power
being
power.
Yeah.
Within is within
true being.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with power you exercise a sort of spiritual jujitsu, which is deflecting the negative. You don't actually attack somebody.
Right.
You're deflecting and using their force against them.
Exactly.
And so, you know, so all of these principles are ancient principles.
Now, it's funny because I wanted to come back to something, and that is when I was writing up the description of this show, I actually referred to, I think I actually said, it's like where we, in order to really have a choice, to go through this, where we are, the shift and choice point, it's like being an alcoholic that must come to terms, honestly, that there's a problem.
And that happens, what's referred to, it happens at what's referred to as a bottom.
Right, okay.
And the bottom is it is the circle of hell that Dante hadn't conceived of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Dante had 9.
Okay.
Alcoholics have a deeper one.
Okay.
And it's at that point when you've played your last card, you've all your best schemes, all your best plans, all your best ideas, all your maneuvering landed you in this place. And it's at that place where you have what we call a moment of clarity. And that moment of clarity is you surrender that your way is not working.
Worked.
And now you have to ask for help.
Yep.
And the two things that I've learned that have saved my life is I don't know, would you help me? Mm-hmm. And I was taught from a young age to never say those things. And it wasn't until I reached a level that was lower than I ever hoped I ever go, and I wouldn't wish on anyone, that I got to a place where I began to crawl out of the place and ascend. C.S. Lewis says the gates of hell are locked from the inside.
Right.
And I chose to, like when I hit bottom, I just didn't hit bottom. I crawled around to see if there was a crevice that I missed.
Right.
You know, there may have been, and so the ascendance from that place was difficult and painful, and and I think that the function of those two experiences, the pain and the discomfort of it, gave it greater value.
Mm-hmm. And so because I feel like we're about ready to, on a collective,
bottom out.
Yeah.
yeah. It's
you know,
yeah. I don't know. I mean, every day I wonder what's next, and this morning on NPR. There was a guy. I just really was. It's just this guy's. The image of this voice was in my head all day. This guy came out of he was a businessman and was incredibly successful and was involved with a number of businesses and philanthropies and hundreds of millions of dollars, and comes out of his office building somewhere in his office building, and he tried to commit suicide and it failed. Mm-hmm. And I guess I don't know the whole story, but they rushed him to the hospital. The cops had the suicide note. In the suicide note, he was apologizing for the 20 years and $200 million that he embezzled, and all these things, all these criminal activities that he did.
That was today?
That was this morning, and I'm thinking, this guy, it's like, it's just again, when is enough? It's like you robbed 200 million. Couldn't you stop at one? It's
right.
like or did you have to at all if you were that successful? You're generating that kind of
addiction,
and it becomes the addiction is an indicator because the alcohol, the money, the sex, because people are addicted to all these power. It's an indicator because that's not the problem. The alcohol isn't the problem. In fact, in the beginning, it's a solution.
Right.
It is an indication of a deeper underlying condition.
Right.
And it's, in my opinion, it's always a soul sickness. Mm-hmm.
Oh, speaking of which, so 2 things. One is, I think, and I didn't hear about this, I don't actually track the news. Excuse me. But I am aware, and there are people that send me things. I am aware that at this time, many of the deceptions around the banking industry globally are coming out and going to come out. So this doesn't surprise me about the suicide. I hadn't heard that, like I said. And I think that this is the clearing out of more light on the planet. This is part of what the evidence of us really moving into a shift is. But the other thing too is the how we look at it and getting to the truth of the bottom of the matter, and the truth of the matter is incredibly important right now. So just as with an addiction, you know, you said sex or drugs or alcohol, whatever it is, it's really coming clean to what the problem has been.
Right. That's the first step, by
right.
the way. That's only the first step. And then there's the action that comes behind it.
Right.
Because I knew that I was an alcoholic before I did anything about it. I used to make a joke about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I could no longer live the way I was living. When I was at the choice point, was live or die.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
And if you're an addict or an alcoholic,
literally live or die.
Well, actually, if you're an alcoholic or an addict, there are actually worse things than dying.
Right.
And I was heading in that direction, and it was a choice point.
Right.
I could no longer bear living the way I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
It's not always necessary, because there are people that I know, people that have recovered and got into recovery before they were completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to stop before that and save
Mm-hmm.
themselves years of hell.
Mm-hmm.
I just hope. I mean, there's a part of me that that really feels that I have to throw myself into into the work, because if I don't, I'll be part of the problem, and I don't want to be part of the problem. On the other hand, it's quite daunting. What we are facing is really, 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 I thought raising a teenager was difficult.
Right.
And raising a teenager sort of took me away from the depth of what's going on now and seeing it. And, it's just, my God, and we really have quite
a road ahead of us.
And the idea of a immediate, A Course in Miracles says that, there are no hierarchy in miracles. It's just, just miracles.
Right.
And so, I'm going by my own experience that I was really plucked from the jaws of just unbelievable crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, step by step, was able to do it in my own life. And I believe that that's what I have to offer, is my experience of transcending that a day at a time and continuing to do that. I haven't arrived. And then share that with whomever may find some inspiration or entertainment or enlightenment out of that, you know?
Right. Okay, so one of the things that we haven't touched upon are the relationships. How the relationships in your life have shifted since you've made the choice to shift and transform. What's transpired? And I know some of it's covered in the film, but...
Well, one of the things I spent a lot of my life, trying to persuade people that didn't love me that they should. and rather than really enjoying and pursuing and nurturing the relationships that were loving, I wasn't doing that. And today, the relationships in my life are infinitely more positive
mm-hmm.
and interesting. I mean, I've met interesting people along my life,
mm-hmm.
of course, but these days, because of the work we're doing,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just amazed at the depth of caring and love that people are in my life express, and I'm really moved and humbled by it. The people that communicate with me as a result of the film, because
mm-hmm.
there are times that I get very discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
I get discouraged because, for one thing, there's always the financial thing looming, and it's kind of scary, particularly when you're at my point of life. And there's all the negative, mean voices that come about. You should be this. The shoulds.
Yeah.
And then
I
get,
say, are you shitting on yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And then I get a correspondence from someone. For example, there's this young individual. I mean, really young and just absolutely lovely individual in their 20s that just got diagnosed with MS and is suffering through treatments, but feels inspired because of the film to try various other approaches to treatment, and that this person feels encouraged to. And I'm thinking, really, like, so I think, wow. Okay, well, maybe this is what you should be doing. You know, where do you? And besides, at this point, yeah, where am I going to go, to an office? I mean, like, really, it's like,
right.
You know, I probably, I don't know if I'm employable at this point, quite frankly.
Self-employable.
I just so there are times when I get very discouraged, and yet when I do get discouraged, the universe sends me something to say, listen, not yet.
Right.
Not yet. And an old mentor told me that God answers prayers in 3 ways. Yes, no, and not yet.
Oh, right.
I get not yet all the time. All the time. I get not yet. So, okay, man.
Well, actually, that's great, because there's one other thing I wanted to come back to. And it goes,
only one?
Yeah.
You're like Columbo. You've been saying that for the past hour. One more thing. Just one more thing.
Has it been fun, though?
Yeah, you know it has. I can't wait to see this. This is wild.
Soul agreements.
Soul agreements.
So now, when you were signing the agreement, what came to my mind is that one of the things that I talk about is that we all have soul agreements and soul assignments. And I'm kind of bringing this full circle, because now where you are, and I don't think I'm employable at this point, because really what you did is you stepped into a soul agreement.
Right.
And you...
I must have been so stoned when I signed this paper. I must have been so messed up, man. That must have been like Thai weed or something, man. Because I signed some agreements.
In the lettuce wrap.
I signed some agreements that I signed up for. What? Where? Show me.
And the camera was rolling, so you couldn't take it. Oh. So, just really bringing it full circle is that I believe we've all come here with different soul assignments, soul agreements, and that it's that saying yes and that willingness and to stepping into for the transformation that we're really here to experience is to continuously express through us the gifts that we have to share with people, and to be willing and open to allowing to continue to be revealed more of who we are. So you're now at a place where you're writing, where you probably, I don't think you were writing back then, what you're writing now.
Not like now, no. I what I have now is I have an editor who gets on my case, and it's different. You know, before it was just sort of it was whimsical. Oh no, she's not a coach.
Okay.
She's a Nazi.
Okay.
She's not a coach. She's an amazing editor. Her name is Deborah Olivier, who wrote What French Women Know. What's written.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The premise is that the French women are aware of the brevity of time and the value of pleasure. I thought I could talk to her, and I have a literary agent, which was amazing. And so now there's a commitment, and so the writing now is takes on a whole different texture and urgency.
And what's your plan at this point to get out and support and be with people and express more of the gifts of transformation?
We're touring the film still. I will be going to, of all places, Vegas, the spiritual center of the United States, the Vortex.
Anchoring light and love in Las Vegas.
Yeah, at the Luxor. Live at the Luxor.
Viva Las Vegas.
Viva transformational experience. And I guess there'll be slot machines with kale and
That would be funny, actually.
Kale and wheatgrass, and
right.
you know, and
3
angel
wheatgrasses.
angel cards.
There we
angel
go.
cards, yes. Tarot, and yeah, instead of 21, it'll be tarot. You know,
18.
18, yes. Nine of Cups. Okay, so and so yeah, so I've been on a few speaking engagements. So I'm promoting that and touring with the film and writing the book.
Right.
I'm also doing a workshop in Sicily.
Oh,
September.
And that's your home.
I've never
area.
been.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
I'm doing my Kunta
That's
Kinte
your lineage.
thing.
Okay.
Or Michael Corleone, pick your guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then October 20th, I'm going to New Zealand. Of all
I've been there.
Because
fabulous.
I had no idea that the film was actually well received in Australia, which I didn't know.
Yes.
So those are coming up.
So Australia and New Zealand, there's a large contingency of people who are waking up.
Amazing.
Amazing.
For a culture that's rooted in rum.
Oh, right.
They're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and
thank you. This is great.
Going with the flow and, you know, little rough patches here and there, but
can you really do anything else though?
You know, no.
I mean, really, could you go against the flow? It's like I don't want to be.
I
I don't really. Of all the animals in the animal kingdom, a salmon is the last thing I want to be.
Yep.
And that's what
right.
And that's what I've been.
Right.
You know? I mean, he's got to go through a lot of trouble for a little love.
Yeah. Little love, going upstream the whole way just to have a little.
I've done that. It's like it's really not worth it.
Done that.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
You're absolutely right.
No.
So, can we do? Yes, I'd like to actually. This is going to be, and then I'm going to come back after this. Eminem. This is. I know it's a little interesting.
The singer, Eminem.
Mm-hmm. Oh. I'm gonna bring in the music video, and the first time I saw this music video, which is the first time I heard the song, and the title is "I'm Not Afraid," and it was very interesting. It was actually riveting for me because I saw it and I heard the words and I saw the music video that they created, and I knew that he created and wrote the song because he was breaking free from what I call the enslavement matrix. And that's part of, well, actually last week's show was all about transcending the enslavement matrix, disentangling. And so this song is extremely powerful. So, yep. And so I'll come back after Eminem and just wrap up the show. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm grateful. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I know some of you might be a little bit surprised that I chose to play Eminem, and I hope that as you were able to listen to and see the music video, that you might have a different experience if you had seen it before. I'm pretty sure that, and the first time, like I said, I saw this, it was riveting to me, and I actually started crying because I got very emotional, because I really feel that he is displaying an incredible power for transformation. And I have a feeling also that it has to do, and he didn't say some of the specific words, I have a feeling that it has to do with him also pulling out of the enslavement matrix and any potential Illuminati type of hold that they have on many of the musicians and have had infiltration in many years. And so that to me is incredibly powerful, and that is a representation also of how powerful it is when we take a stand for our individual lives, and just as Frank displayed so beautifully. And I hope that you catch and will actually go watch May I Be Frank. It's very, very powerful, very transformative, and he took a stand for his life. And that's where we're at. That's where I feel that we are at choice point. Humanity is at choice point, and that we need to come clean with ourselves. What's in breakdown, so that we can actually get and transition through to breakthrough. And just as Eminem was saying, is I'm not afraid to take a stand. And as we collectively do that, and in just a few weeks, by next week I will be announcing the first date that Cobra and I and others will be holding our first unified field call. And this call will be for anchoring a new paradigm, activating a new timeline, and that reality is just ready and waiting for us to step out of the fear and survival as a collective consciousness of just even a couple thousand, 500,000 people doing that to fully bring into expression the new paradigm. Now, by no stretch of the imagination, in what Frank was saying, I agree with. We have some tough times ahead of us, and my guides have been coming in actually saying a lot in the last couple weeks that is an upheaval. And every single day I'm getting communication that we are in upheaval, and there is much more upheaval coming. The good news is, and what I'm really going to encourage people to be through this journey, is to, one, allow ourselves to release all attachments to the old paradigm. Two, be willing to be vulnerable and be real with yourself, and to notice where you have shadows coming up, where you have woundedness. And another thing is for us to collectively unify and create that unification, because where two or more are gathered, and then we activate that unified field, oh my gosh, I have already seen incredible, profound results. And in fact, next week's show is actually going to be with some of the clients that I've worked with that have had, I'm going to say, profound transformation, and you'll hear it from them. When the activation begins, now I actually want to go back and just say something, because what I really was trying to start with the show, and we had some glitches because we had a last minute change with a guest, and we just are going with the flow here, and we had some glitches with the clips being ready. And I actually want to acknowledge my team, David Del Grosso, Ruben, Eugene, and Jameson, and these guys are so awesome. And so here we are live, and I don't want to actually change this and not do it live, because eventually I'm going to be doing calls, taking calls and tuning in and answering questions, once we actually get the technology down a little bit better. But what I was intending to start the show off with, and so I'm going to just bring this full circle back, is that there's chemicals, whether it's chemtrails or some of the different things that are being put out there, that are affecting our brain chemistry, and they're affecting the natural activation of the pineal and the pituitary. And I'm going to get into that more in another show. But what is important to be aware of is that once you start that and have that activation frequency, activate the alchemical transformation, life changes dramatically, should you continue saying yes. And so that's what next week's show is all about. People, because it's experiential, it's hard to describe. It's like trying to describe how it feels to ride a bike. You really can only say so much until you actually get on the bike and you ride it. And then Alan Steinfeld, who has New Realities TV, we're going to talk about living in the fifth dimension and the emotional components of walking through the shift. So if I can leave you with anything from today's show, is that we have some work ahead of us. And just as Frank's experience was very challenging, that is potentially what we have ahead of us. But I do believe that to get to any type of peace and a loving planet, and being able to co-create with universal energies and living in the vibration and frequency of love and that inner stillness and inner peace, not just words, but that beingness, it's worth it. And so it just is going to take us getting together and really having a clear vision and activating that reality into existence. And I know we can do it. So thank you so much for going with the flow today. And thank you for everything that you are being and doing on your journey, in your path. And even if you are in the I don't know what I don't know, if you don't know what even some of the stuff I'm talking about is, it's okay. It's all there for, you know, you to come back to as well. And so the most important thing is that you have the intention of being in a place of loving yourself and being willing and open to surrender and to be coachable and to be open to whatever is coming in for your highest and divine truth. And so there you have it. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Deborah Ariel Peach. This is Wake Up, Shift is Happening, and I hope to see you next week.